YouTube friends and family, to today's cooking edition of the Wellness Homesteader. So first I want to say you all touch my heart in so many ways, I've got some new subbies and my returning folks, your kind comments. I was a little worried about yesterday's video. Today is Wednesday, and Tuesday's video I filmed on Tuesday. It's hard sometimes to get ahead. Just that it wasn't an interesting topic, that it was too chatty, then I almost cried. But y'all are you're so good to me. And y'all, I needed that yesterday. So I want to really thank you for it. So today we are going to be doing the cooking. That's why all the appliances are out. For a very good friend whose husband had surgery. Thank you all who indicated you were praying for the husband. I would ask, as they are still waiting on some test results, that you'll continue to pray. Keep them in your thoughts. So I am cooking for 6. So if that helps you. And I debated back and forth, and I love a good new recipe. I also love an excuse to peruse my vintage cookbooks. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I'd hate to make something that I've never made before and it turn out like wah, wah, wah. So it'd be better if I used a tried and true. So what I'm going to make first is my absolute favorite, fail-safe, go-to recipe for maple buttermilk bread. Now, this bread is very slightly sweet, but one of the family members does not consume any cane sugar, only like honey, maple syrup, and maybe some artificial sweeteners as well. So, and that has kind of been my diet too. So this is a perfect recipe. So let me tip you down here. Y'all, I'm trying it today without my lidocaine patch. And thank you for whoever suggested Aspercream. I got to get some of that. All right, so I'm going to make the 1.5 pound loaf. Y'all don't laugh. I might have a few things tagged. This is the Bread Lovers Bread Machine Cookbook. Y'all, if you like using your bread machine, you need this. I have made so many recipes out of this, as has my son. And, we're both kind of in the circumstance that homemade bread, not having any preservatives, it's hard for me to eat it. Well, it makes too much Kym if I do. Eat it up before it spoils, even if I refrigerate it, which I usually will refrigerate it. So I usually give half anyway. So I'm just going to you can do a 1.5 or 2 pound loaf. And first thing we need here is 1 cup plus, and I'm going to be using my Zojirushi bread machine. So into the bread pan, always the liquids first. I think for every bread machine I've ever owned, and I've only owned 2. Finally, the one from 1981 I donated when I got my Zojirushi. Not because it didn't work. It worked perfectly fine. More from a storage, and I knew that I would use this because the other one was a vertical. So we also need 1.5 tablespoons of unsalted melted butter. Can you believe it, y'all? Now, I'm not going to guarantee I have everything out, but I'm going to try not to clank for those of you who wear headphones, earphones, and I'm going to try to be efficient because we're going to be making 3 different things. Okay, and then the last ingredient is 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. Now, you'll all know that I used to be the drop coordinator for Azure. I decided personally to give that to a younger person because it was a lot, guys. It's a lot because our particular drop had a lot of 50-pound bags of feed, and as a participant, everyone's supposed to unload the truck, but we also had a lot of older people, so I found myself overexerting my back. Can't imagine trying to do it with my shoulder. All right, so this is the Maple Valley Cooperative Organic Maple Syrup, dark and robust. It's very good. What I'm finding is I'm kind of running out of a lot of my Azure products. So I may decide to do another Azure order. And if I do, I'll be happy to share what I purchased. I have a feed barn near me where I can get organic feed, chicken bedding. I can get a lot of things that weren't available when I first started buying from Azure. So here we go. Now, let me tell you something I've learned about the Zojirushi. And it may just be my machine, but my son has also found the same thing. If your bread loaves are coming out less than even, y'all add a teaspoon to a tablespoon more of water. That seems to make them cook more level. I don't know why, but it does. So 3 tablespoons of maple syrup in an entire loaf of bread. It's not super sweet. It makes a great breakfast toast. Definitely a great breakfast toast. Let me rinse this off because we're going to need it. It is a chilly morning here. It is 34 degrees. And my poor naked molting chickens are not happy about it. Bless their little hearts. I think they looked worse yesterday than they looked any other day. So hopefully they're about done. All right. So we've got all of our liquids in the bottom. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add 3 cups, no clinking, of bread flour. And y'all, I was looking yesterday. My Amazon affiliate links are pretty long. I did take a few out for yesterday's video. I need to probably clean it up more. But things that I frequently get questions about, like my bread machine, like my measuring cups and spoons, which are from Morgan Hahn, they are linked in the description box if you have interest. All right, and when I measure my bread flour, I use a scoop, scoop it into the cup for the most accurate measurement. I'm always enamored with watching homesteading channels where the ladies make their bread or their sourdough and they don't measure anything like with a cup. I think a lot of it is how I learned. You must measure and you must measure everything. Now I could do home ground flour. However, I've never made this recipe using home ground flour. And I just don't want to have to be like, wah, wah, wah. Sorry about how this came out. So here we go. That's our 3 cups of bread flour. And I'm going to go ahead and do the bread first because start to finish, it's, I think 3 hours, 40 minutes is the cook time. And that'll give it time to cool and let me wrap it. They can have it with their dinner and then it gives them some toast for breakfast. Okay, next we need, have I purchased my cheaters, you ask? No, I haven't. Oh, y'all, I gotta do that. I don't think about it. That would be gluten. That would be a disaster. So one thing I will share with you, buttermilk powder does have a tendency to absorb moisture from the air. I love these gallon jars from Azure, but they don't have a way to seal them. But this seems absolutely fine. And it's a fraction of the cost when purchased in bulk. Let me make sure I've got a third of a cup. Yes, from Azure. And y'all, I've complained about this before. One disadvantage to this book is the print is brown versus, I don't know, black in a normal size. Very difficult for me to see. Next, I'm going to add Vital Wheat gluten, and it's 1 tablespoon. And y'all, I've been asked, do you really have to add the extra gluten? If the recipe calls for it, I've never made it without adding the gluten. One thing to remember is when you're using a bread machine, you're not getting the same mixing, kneading action that you would with your hands. So that may be why all of this book's recipes pretty much call for Vital Wheat gluten. I buy it in a large quantity. It lasts a long, long time. Next is a teaspoon and a half of salt. I'm using Redmond. So that is half of a tablespoon. That's one of the things I really like about the Morganhans. They, and I'm going to put it in the corners, guys, so it doesn't interfere with the yeast. They have some odd measurements. So there's 3 teaspoons and a tablespoon. So half of a tablespoon is a teaspoon and a half. And then we need 1 3/4 teaspoon SAF or 2 1/4 teaspoons of bread machine yeast. Let me get mine out of the freezer. And this is SAF yeast. I just used it when we made our election cake, so I know it's fine. 1 3/4. And if you're tempted, y'all, to, oh, I'm going to add more because, that will make a better rise. Not always the case. What can often happen when you do that is your bread will overrise, have big tunnels in it, and then it'll fall in the middle. So I'm putting my yeast right in the center away from the salt because we know that salt can deactivate or impair the function, shall we say, of yeast. So that's all there is to it. Now, read you a little description of the bread. This is my absolute favorite recipe from the book. It's a basic white bread that pairs tangy buttermilk with maple syrup and is especially nice for toast and sandwiches. Produced by boiling the sap of the sugar maple tree, maple syrup has the most aromatic and enticing flavors of any natural sweetening. Let's see. Place all the ingredients in the pan, set crust to medium, and do a basic cycle or a white. So, over here's my ginormous Zojirushi. I love my bread machine. The only thing I dislike about it is it weighs 10 tons. And I don't really have room on my countertop, so I have to tote it back and forth. So we want course number 1 and crust control medium. And so that'll be done about 11:24, so that'll give it a couple hours to cool before they have to worry about cutting it. So I've been going back and forth on dessert, y'all. I was like, do I make pie? Pie good. Unfortunately, I'm out of home canned apple pie filling, and I don't have any apples on hand, so that would mean a trip to the farmer's market, which they don't open till 10, so that's not an option. And because there are 4 children to feed, I thought, you know what might be good is just a good old-fashioned chocolate chip cookie bar. So I think that's what I'm going to make here. I've got a huge mess to clean up, so let's do that. And then we're going to make Toll House cookie bars. Now, the recipe that I'm using is from The Reluctant Entertainer. Yeah, I'm not a reluctant entertainer, but I thought, well, that sounds simple. So it has, the usual suspects. It does call for mini chocolate chips. I don't have mini chocolate chips. I'm going to use regular chocolate chips. I thought about putting dried cranberries in there, and I thought, I don't know if the kids like dried cranberries. So then I looked at cranberry desserts. I've been down a whole rabbit hole this morning, so we'll make a cranberry dessert. There's one I have in mind. That sounds really, really good, but it's super complicated, and I'll have to buy a tart pan. So let me clean this up. We'll get to making our cookie bars. I hope you'll stay tuned. All right, y'all ready to make some cookie bars? So I have here 2 sticks of butter. It doesn't specify salted or unsalted. what I happen to have thawed was unsalted. The recipe calls for salt, so, you know, to help with the leavening, so I'm sure it'll be just fine. So let's get those in there. And what we're gonna do is cream our butter and sugar together. I have my oven preheating to 350. And y'all, even though I have a split oven, I found that if I am going to be making a dish, let's say, you know, for sharing or whatsoever, I have the ability to pull out the divider and use the entire oven. I do think things cook a little more evenly, and the problem with just using the top, because it is a convection oven, is sometimes it just, it overcooks the top, but it doesn't cook in the middle, so we don't want that. So the next thing we need is 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. And as I mentioned, I'm just gonna call them wife, husband, and kiddos, right? She will not be eating these just because it's not her thing. She tries to avoid sugar, and I try never, first of all, I always ask about food allergies, which I don't have to work around for this particular meal. I always ask if it's okay to feed the children sugar. When my son was young, okay, so that's 3/4 cup of white sugar, a lot of sweets would give him an asthma attack. All right, and then the next item is our brown sugar. I keep looking over there and it's over here, and it's the same amount, 3/4 cup of brown sugar. And you want to pack that in. And y'all, it goes without saying, but somebody will comment and say, did you wash your hands? Did you disinfect the counters? Trust me, I did. And I also waited till Frankie was in nap time before I started this project. So I have the batter beater. I know that's not what it's called, but that's what I call it on here. And the other thing, y'all, I have these brown sugar bears. And what you do is you soak them in water and then put them down in your brown sugar, and it prevents it from getting hard. And they really do make a difference. So I've been soaking those. Let's go ahead and put those back in. So we're gonna cream this together first. Even though that's not what the recipe says, I just find it works better. And anytime you're using a stand mixer, I always find it's good to get your spatula out and scrape, because invariably something doesn't get mixed in. So let me cream this. Y'all know how to use a mixer. And yeah, wash my hands, and then I'll bring you back and we'll continue to add ingredients. So stay tuned. All right, I'll try to speak up a little bit. The bread machine, the Zojirushi, the reason you don't have to use warm water to activate the yeast is it heats the pan first to the desired temperature, so there's no guesswork in it, and then it will start its first knead. So 2 of my sacred girly eggs, and oh y'all, those poor little chickens, bare butts behind. I feel for them. They don't like to be they don't seem to be in pain, but they don't like being handled when they're bare. So it kind of makes sense. You know, they're kind of naked and they're not used to that. And again, I'm just kind of beating it until it gets light and fluffy. And then we'll get to adding some additional ingredients. We have vanilla, salt, baking soda, flour, and then of course last we'll stir in our chocolate chips. By then, our oven should be preheated. This is a quick bake because I am doing it in a 9 by 13. There are no directions for a smaller pan. I'm sure if you want thicker ones, you could make a smaller pan. But I decided, no, I'm gonna use the 9 by 13. It'll look like more. So I'll bring you back then. I'm sorry, could I make more noise in here? Right, be sure you scrape down your bowl really well. The next thing we're going to add is a generous teaspoon of vanilla. The recipe, this particular recipe calls for a teaspoon of almond extract in addition. Yeah, no. No, I think that's gonna alter the taste and not taste like a traditional chocolate chip cookie bar. Of course it's not done. It's like I'm just thinking about it. Okay, next you wanna add your salt and baking soda. So it's a teaspoon of each. Now, why are we adding it now instead of with our flour? Well, we want it to get well incorporated into the soft ingredients so you don't have uneven rising. So that was just a teaspoon of baking soda, not baking powder. And we'll do a teaspoon of salt. And because I'm using Redmond real salt, y'all, I'm gonna do it just a little scant. I find Redmond real salt to be a little saltier than regular salt. That may just be my taste buds. So let me get this whirled around, and then the last thing we have to do is mix in our flour, and then we will do our chocolate chips by hand. All right, so I added in 2 1/4 cup of just all-purpose flour. Again, I'm not using freshly ground, just because I'm not sure that it would come out the same. And then, I forgot, these are only right-handed scissors. It's a right-handed world. I'm thankful I can use both, especially right now. It calls for 2 cups of chocolate chips. And y'all, just my opinion, I've tried a lot of generic, you know, like the Walmart brand, be a little generous with that, of chips, and they're okay for me, but if I'm making a dish for someone else, especially the semi-sweet, I'm gonna go to either Toll House or Ghirardelli. So I have my 9 by 13 pan, I've sprayed it, I took a paper towel and wiped out the excess, and y'all, I don't think I can stir this with my right arm. Might have to get a big old spoon. It's a very stiff batter, like you would expect, like a cookie batter. But I want to get those chocolate chips incorporated so everybody gets a taste. Let's see if we can do it with this arm. I'm trying to keep that arm a-moving, y'all. Need to go get me some Aspercream today. The problem is that's a 40-minute round trip, and my priority today is just cooking. Another thing that I'll probably add to the meal, I'm gonna go through my pantry, is a homemade jar of jam, you know, for toast, for breakfast, or just because kids like jam. And I have enough for the whole universe. And then I was trying to think, even though there's peas, I'm gonna make chicken and noodles in the Instant Pot if I didn't say that. Even though there's peas in it, I feel like it needs a side vegetable. So I do have my home canned carrots, maybe a jar of applesauce that I did with maple syrup. If I have any left, I may have gotten through it all. So it's always nice to have canned home canned goods on your shelf. I greatly admire J. Morrell Stewart. I know she's not everybody's cup of tea, but she does so much for other people as far as, you know, if somebody has a baby, if somebody has an illness in the family or a hospitalization, she constantly is cooking and making things for people. And she does a lot of freezer meals, which is fine too. I know my parents, my mother, cooked for the universe. And I think that's where I get it from. It's just, you know, in spite of what's going on around you, one thing you have to do is you have to eat. And sometimes it's overwhelming. Just like with everything going on, really, I have to figure out a meal too. And especially when there's children involved and, you know, you want to make sure they're getting their nutrition. Okay, I'm going to put this in the pan. Into the oven we go. And it says, oh, might have been stuck to the counter. 25 to 35 minutes. I'll check it at 20. And you can do it as individual cookies and bake it at 350 for 10 minutes. So I'm gonna get this into the pan, into the oven. It smells absolutely amazing. Might wanna lick the bowl, but I won't because it's full of sugar. All right, guys, see you soon. These look and smell absolutely amazing. I ended up baking them for the full 35 minutes, and now I'm just going to let them cool before I cut them and transfer them to a platter. All right, y'all, so here's our beautiful cookie bars all wrapped and ready to deliver. And ta-da, my bread actually came out even. I'm telling you, if you have problems with your Zoji Rushi not coming out as flat as you wish it would, try adding, you know, I would start with a teaspoonful of water. So now we are going to make some Instant Pot chicken and noodles. So one of the things I try to keep on hand is some meat in the freezer and some things I can make a quick casserole, or for example, the chicken and noodles. This is always a crowd pleaser. I do it a lot for, like, well, when they were living, like aunts and uncles, because sometimes they have a little bit of trouble with their chewing. That's not the case with this particular person, but it's pretty quick. So this comes from simplyhappyfoodie.com. And honestly, guys, I can't find my recipe, but I think this one's it. So the first thing we're going to do, here's my Instant Pot over here, and I'm not going to drag you around. So I'm going to turn on the saute and hit the start button. So really, we're not sauteing anything, we're just heating things up. So let me tell you, this recipe, you can cut the butter in half. It's not necessarily the most diet friendly, let me say it that way, but it's delicious. And particularly because this may get warmed over or there may be leftovers, because it's a pretty big batch, I want to make sure that it doesn't get dried out and the noodles don't get gummy. So the first thing we want to do, my butter stuck, is put our stick of butter, and I am using, again, unsalted. Well, doggone, can I get that without using my fingers? And I just washed my hands. So I'm gonna stick the inner liner in, and what we're going to add to that is some chicken broth. Now it calls for 2 14.5-ounce cans of chicken broth. What I actually have, and I want to use it, it's still perfectly good, is some organic chicken bone broth, great for healing. This is 16.9 ounces, so let me grab a measuring cup because it's 3 3/4 cup, and I don't want it to be like too runny. Y'all, I just went out and gave my girly girls some treats, and let me tell you what, my poor Jolene is so naked. I have never seen her mold that bad. These are very difficult to get open. They came from Thrive Market. Blah, 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 blah. You're supposed to be able to tear this. I don't know that I... Oh, look at me. How about me? Oops. You know, just anoint your counter. Yeah, I'm glad I'm going to measure that because that is going to be too much. So what can you do with the extra chicken broth? Well, you can freeze it, number one. You could add it to a soup. You could use it to cook rice or any type of noodle as well. Do you ever get frustrated, y'all, with the way things are packaged? Like some things, I don't like batteries. Batteries are like the worst. I mean, you might as well just get the scissors because I'm not going to be able to get that open. All right. Managed to get that open. I'm not crazy about the cartons. The broth is amazing, and I'm going to show you in just a moment how rich and dark it is. So even though it's higher in fat, this particular person is on the slim side, so, well, they all are. Okay. Well, it really wasn't that much extra, but like I said, if this was just for me, I'd probably just toss it in there. But look how beautiful this broth is. So it's really nice and rich in color. Let's see how well, now why? Oh, Lord, I forgot to hit start. Saute, start. Okay. I had to get a new Instant Pot because when I was putting my original one away, I might have slipped and dropped it, and it went to Instant Pot heaven. It hadn't worked since. So the other thing we're going to need is we're going to need 2 cans of cream of chicken soup. I tell you, y'all, I really like the Great Value cream of chicken soup. Do not like the cream of mushroom, but the cream of chicken is actually pretty good. And I don't think it's any less quality than what you get from Campbell's. And there's not too many soups I can say that about. I did want to let this butter kind of rock and roll a minute. So one of the things, y'all, I'm sorry to keep saying ouch. By the end of the day, my shoulder's like, I'm over it. One of the things about an Instant Pot that I don't love is things have a tendency to stick. And it's not easy to deglaze the pan. I'm not a fan of non-stick surfaces, but I found since I replaced mine, and this is just an Instant Pot. I don't think it's any, oh, it's a Duo Plus. I did grab the manual just in case. It does do a few different things than what my old one did, but it doesn't seem to have that excessive heating like the first one did. So they've made a slight improvement in my opinion. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead, now that our butter's melting down. And again, guys, you can use half a stick or even less. If you use less, I would increase your broth so that your noodles aren't dry. And then, y'all, let me wash my hands because I just rubbed my nose. If it was just for me, it wouldn't so much matter, but don't want to gross out the neighbors, you know. All right, so we'll do our 2 cans of cream of chicken soup. And again, y'all, I think this is just as good as Campbell's. Smells good, looks good. So go ahead and add that. And I'm just using a little spatula to get it out. So I think, you know, this is a simple recipe. Like if you hadn't really planned on having company and boom, you were gonna have company, it's nice to have the frozen egg noodles, some frozen veg. I'm going to use a bag of peas because that seems to be everybody's favorite when I've made it before. I always have the cream of soups. And it really comes together quickly. You just have to get your chicken thawed. And I don't like to microwave thaw meat, so I actually thought ahead and got my meat thawed the night before. So give that a stir. And then calls for half of a teaspoon of salt. I am going to go ahead and add that. No one that will be eating this is on any sort of a salt restriction. And I will tell you, you know, noodles to me really suck up the salt. So what we're doing is we're making the full sauce, and I'm just gonna guesstimate, guys. We'll cook our chicken, we'll pull it out so that we can shred it. Pardon me. Half a teaspoon of black pepper. I'm not gonna go crazy with it because there will be kids eating this. And garlic clove pressed, or half a teaspoon of garlic powder. I'm just going to use some pre-chopped garlic. That looks like the equivalent of a clove. And it calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of poultry seasoning. I'm not going to put that in. I never do because basically I don't have that. We'll let this kind of heat up. I'll rewash my hands again. Why does your nose itch when you cook? I don't know. Mine always does. And once it's kind of come together, I'll shut the pot off. I'll bring you back and I'll show you what the next steps are. All Stay tuned. Hands washed for the 8,000th time. So I am going to hit cancel, which is going to turn off the saute mode. Everything is kind of amalgamated together. Let me see if I can. Oh, there we go. That's better. And what it calls for is 2 large chicken breasts. So it's a lot more noodle than it is chicken. That's not what we're going to do because, again, we're feeding 6, 4 of which are hungry kiddos, right? So I have here let's see, about 3 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. You can use breast, you can use whatever you happen to have. I'm not worried about cleaning every bit of the fat off because it's super easy to do once it's cooked, and we'll be pulling the chicken out and shredding it while we cook our noodles. So I'm going to add in our chicken thighs. You just want to make sure they're all submerged. Send them all for a good swim. And rewash your hands. So they should have in the ingredient list a bottle of hand soap. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our lid on. And this little line here lines up with here. I've already gotten something on the front of this. And you want to have it on the steam release knob on the sealing position, which it used to be back here. Now it's on the lid up front, so it's in the seal position. So now we want to pressure cook it for 12 minutes. So I'm going to hit pressure cook. I'm going to dial it up. Ooh, not to that much. Oh my word, how do you? Well, I don't want that much. Hang on, guys. Got to figure out how to dial it down. Y'all. That's why you always keep the manual handy. So on this particular model, the newer model, and I've only used it, I think this is only the 3rd time, I selected chicken and it defaults to 10 minutes. You go ahead and push the select button, which is the silver button here. And once you do that, then you can dial up or down the time. Now you may notice I have 14 minutes on here. That's because a couple of the chicken thighs that were in the center were not as thawed as the rest of them, and they weren't completely frozen or anything. And it says if they are frozen, which you can cook it from frozen, select 18 minutes. So we are going to let the pressure build up, and let's see what our next step. We will let it set for 10 minutes doing a natural release. So we'll just let the pressure come down on its own. I'll bring you back at that time. All right, y'all. 10 minutes natural release, then I push the button. It's completely depressurized. It says okay to open lid. Woo, that looks delish. It smells really good. So let's go ahead and we're gonna pull out our chicken. Woo. Let that cool a minute while we do the other steps. And probably would be easier with a spoon, wouldn't it? We're gonna cook our noodles next, and they also get pressured. I am using 24-ounce bag of frozen Reams noodles. I find that they taste the closest to homemade of any that I've had. And they're always a big hit. So here we go. Almost there. Wow, that broth looks delish. Make sure we've got it all out. Okay. So it says add the frozen, turn off the pot. So we'll cancel it. And we are going to add the frozen egg noodles. So again, the Reams frozen egg noodles. And one thing you do want to make sure of is that your noodles are submerged. Anything that isn't submerged will come out tough and awful. We're going to put our lid back on. And we're going to pressure cook again for 6 minutes. And this should go pretty quickly. It shouldn't take as long to preheat. And while that's cooking, we're going to shred our chicken. One of the things it says to do is sprinkle your chicken with another 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm probably going to omit that part just because they can add salt at the table. And again, I'm kind of picking the chicken because I do not want any fatty pieces. Who wants to get a bite of fat or a bite of gristle? But these are pretty clean. They're not so bad. And it's so tender. Let me show you here just how tender. A little bit of fat right there. I'm just dropping it here on the bag. So let me take a look at this one. This one's pretty clean with almost no fat. But look how tender. Like, you could probably just pull it apart with 2 forks. I just grabbed a knife thinking it would be a little bit easier. So I'm going to shred up this chicken. We're going to let this pressure cook for 6 minutes. We'll let it do a natural release, which just means we don't vent it for 5 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and vent it. We'll add our chicken back in, and then I'm going to add some sweet peas. It says 1 to 2 cups of mixed vegetables. Since I'll just make a judgment call. I'm probably going to use the whole bag, and I went ahead and thawed them. It says you can put them in frozen. I just am starting to run up against the clock a little bit for meal delivery, so I don't want them to starve in the meantime. But yes, this is some beautiful chicken, and I'm very pleased with how it's come out so far. So I'll bring you back for next steps. All right, y'all, we're on the rapid countdown. 5 minutes natural release, then manual release. Always open the lid away. Quite a bit ooped out of the steam vent, so I'll clean that up. And now what we want to do is add our chicken. And our frozen, partially thawed peas. Let's see, I think I'm gonna add them all. Yeah, we're gonna add them all. This is a 12-ounce bag, so wow, looks great. And then you just wanna let it sit on keep warm so that those peas have time to warm up, the chicken warms back up. And I will tell you, this does thicken upon standing. So I am gonna dish up a little bit for myself to have. And I'll show you what it looks like. And then we're gonna end the video for the day because I have literally been cooking all day. But you know what? I know it will be appreciated very much. So here's what we have. Doesn't that look delicious? I can tell you that it is so good. The noodles aren't soggy. They're more of an al dente texture, which is good. I mean, who wants, you know, who's like, oh gosh, I hope I get soggy noodles, right? So drop me a comment below. What is your go-to when you need to prepare a meal for someone in need or for some occasion? I have this on backwards. Oh, Lordy. Messy, messy, messy. And if you would do me another favor, go ahead and smash that like button. I'm going to get my car loaded and head out to my friend's house. So I thank you for spending, I know this was a long video, I thank you for spending the day with me, keeping me company as I cooked in the kitchen. And if you would, please just keep the mister in your thoughts and prayers. Still no results on the biopsy. So I know that's got to be a very nerve-wracking time. So if you would just please pray for them, all of them. All right, guys, I will see you hopefully on Saturday with the sewing project. But until then, be healthy, be well, be blessed, and take care.